We're going to talk about the presidential election in Bosnia because the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina had a presidential election on October 2nd. So you'd think it'd be a done deal, but it's not because they have yet to declare a winner. Could it be because the person who won was not supposed to win? This is the big question. Why? Because he was not the candidate that NATO wanted to win. So now votes are being recounted after protests raged over the weekend. Now, you will forgive me. I'm going to shorten the name of this country to Bosnia for ease of reporting.
Instead of saying Herzegovina?
It just doesn't come off nicely of my extremely Anglo accent, so you will forgive me. The Election Commission announced on Monday that they will recount the results in Sarajevo. They will particularly focus on the votes that came from the Serb-run states, which were previously counted in each respective election office. The candidate that had declared victory is the incumbent, Milorad Dodik. He is an ethnic Serb. The West used to really like him, but that has changed in recent years. He actually has been sanctioned by the West since before the conflict in Ukraine because of alleged corruption and the fact that he advocates for the separation of the Serb Republic from the Federation of Bosnia. Now, these are the two regions in Bosnia. The Federation is largely made up of Croat Bosnian population. This is a crude explanation of the ethnic divisions that have persisted in this region for decades. And many say, look, it never really was going to work, having two federations in one independent state. But NATO likes it that way. It was actually NATO that came up with this system in 1995 in what is called the Dayton Agreement. The Dayton Agreement, you may not know, comes from the city of Dayton, Ohio. And if you're wondering what the bleep does Ohio have to do with Bosnian geography? Well, Ohio is the location of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that's where this arrangement was hammered out.
Where I used to live in Dayton, Ohio.
Yes. What do you call it? The fast food hub of the
what's
world?
interesting about Dayton, Ohio is I don't know if they've changed this, but the Chamber of Commerce of Dayton, Ohio considers themselves America's most average city. And I don't know if they've changed that, but that used to be what the Chamber of Commerce said on purpose. So
I don't think you can say that anymore. That's unwoke.
No, the reason
I thought that was Muncie, Indiana.
Well, no, I guess there's going to be a fight about it.
Well, no, because they actually did a huge study in the 70s of Muncie, Indiana called the Midtown Studies, and it was scientifically proven to be the most average, basically the last place any trend ended up in the United States was Muncie, Indiana.
No, well,
because I went to Ball State.
Well, yeah, but Dayton, Ohio. So I forget which intersection. There's a major cross-country intersection. I forget the highways off the top of my head. But they would test out all of the new chain restaurants right at that intersection. So Joe's Crab Shack, the Olive Garden,
Macaroni Grill.
They all got their start testing out in that intersection. Because people are traveling across the country and they stop there at the hotels. It's a good test bed. So America's most average city, Dayton, Ohio, was responsible for the Dayton Accords. Home
of the two federation system in Bosnia. You would not have known that. And also apparently Macaroni Grill. The Dayton Agreements put an end to NATO's air campaign called Operation Deliberate Force. Operation Deliberate Force was the first major combat mission from NATO, and it was a doozy. It involved over 1,026 bombs from 400 aircrafts and 5,000 personnel from 15 nations. Now, at the time, NATO said they were doing this to stop the ethnic genocide happening during the Bosnian War. But in recent years, Bosnian politicians refute that, including President Dodik. He has said that these genocides were, quote, a fabricated myth. Now, this is where my Western internet will just not really allow me to go. And I have to admit to you that in one afternoon, it's really hard to go down this rabbit hole. I can only find articles in English saying that he says this. And every time the Western press covers this, they say, isn't this crazy that he says this? In fact, the United Nations has tried really hard to prevent him and other politicians from saying this. They tried to pass a law in Bosnia to make it illegal for anyone to deny the atrocities, but Bosnian parliament nullified it last year. So it is still legal in Bosnia right now to say that this was, but for now, right? You're looking uncomfortable. Like, can we say these kind of things? Do you want to stop me if you've heard this one?
No, just
before?
a lot of people have a lot to say about Dodik. Is it Dodik or Dodik? Because a lot
I'm
are
sorry,
saying
I'm saying it wrong. It is Dodik or Dodik.
Right. So people are saying
I'm sorry.
It is Dodik. Dodik. Yes.
I've heard it both ways. I don't know if the I is hard. I know it is with a hard K, not a ch at the end. I already apologized for my
there's
Anglo
no hard
accent.
I in Dodik. Okay.
Yeah, it's really hard to say Dodik, so you just got to be really careful.
Stop it. Stop.
Sorry, it's Testosterone Taco Tuesday. What do you
Okay.
expect from these men? These men who we got to laugh from this, you know.
No, we shouldn't be laughing because I'm trying to get to the bottom of whether or not this genocide was actually something that NATO acted upon to rain hell on Bosnia.
That's exactly
or
what
not.
happened. So let's talk about the genocide piece of this. We absolutely know that that's what happened. NATO absolutely used the basically launched an attack on this area and then later claimed there was genocide. That's exactly what happened. So just ask any journalist who covers this area, what's the truth about this? And that's absolutely the truth about this. Creating justification for an invasion for 78 days of hell.
Right.
Raining down on the people there. That's absolutely what happened. Let us know in the chat if you disagree with us on that. If for some reason, and yes, there were people killed. It was not a genocide.
Well, actually, both presidential candidates admit that this is not a word that they should be using in when they talk about this 1995 incidents, which then would beg the question: what is the justification for that NATO strike, for the hell that rained down in 1995? And what is the justification for the continued NATO presence there, which we are going to talk about in a minute? These are big questions. But also, guess what else Dodik is for? Russian gas. He has a friendly relationship with Putin, and he has no problems with Russian gas at all. He is anti-freezing his people this winter. And when asked if he would reject Russian oil, he said no. And he proposed what he's calling an economic association of solidarity. So that's an interesting term. What does that mean? An association of solidarity. So who would be in that? People who refuse to align with NATO priorities and band together? Obviously, you can see why NATO would say, I don't like that. I don't like hearing that. Here's what he said. He says, when asked about sanctions, the West must learn that communication is no longer possible from the position of demanding complete obedience and submission. Therefore, if the West wants to talk, it must respect our foreign policy priorities, of which the main one is successful cooperation with Russia. Of course, we're painting in broad strokes, but you can see where I'm going with this. A leader who refuses to go along with sanctions, anti-NATO, refuses to demonize Putin, refuses to admit things that the West needs him to admit in order to validate NATO, wants to cooperate with Russia. So the logical question for us to ask, is there a Western motivation to delegitimize his election?
Of course. And I see so many people in the chat saying, yes, there was no genocide in Bosnia. And here, let's just read this here. This is Goran Stodichev. Hold on, I gotta get this so it doesn't disappear on me. It goes so fast. So here's a super chat from Goran. Says, in the Hague court, they refused to accept as undeniable proof of no genocide official report from Muslim Army made in late 1995 on this matter, as it was not in line with the official narrative.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Goran, for that super chat.
Yes. So, I mean, this is amazing. And if we look at then the opposition candidate, she is 39-year-old Jelena Trivik. Many are saying that she is Western aligned because she was educated in Europe, but she also, this is a tweet from her in 2021, refuses the genocide narrative, which delegitimizes NATO. So if you want to call her Western aligned, that's fine, but at least she, you can. But she also does not go along with this NATO strike rained in hell because of a genocide narrative. This tweet that I just showed you was translated by Twitter, so I apologize for The translation is not completely grammatical, but it says the crime that happened in Srebrenica is not genocide. These are facts. Form subjects, but you won't change my attitude. Serbs are people who do not kneel before the occupier, especially they will not kneel before an imposed law. For us, this republic is sacred, and this isn't a direct attack on Serbia. So early reports were that she lost the election by 30,000 votes, but now she says that there were irregularities. In over 3 million votes, she's saying that there were dozens of irregularities and that Dodik's, I don't know how to do the possessive, the thugs intimidated voters on election day, and that poll workers loyal to him changed votes. Now, if that's true, would a recount even do anything? If the votes were changed, couldn't you see like eraser marks, or you can't see paper trail of intimidation? Now, of course, I'm not giving enough time to her politics because this is just an overview of this issue, but I do think it's interesting to talk about who has increasing presence in Bosnia since midsummer as these elections heated up. Listen to who has conveniently come to camp out there.
NATO and the European Union have increased their presence in the region. The bloc has doubled the number of its peacekeepers in Bosnia in fear that instability caused by Russia and Ukraine could spread.
Okay, so NATO and the EU have doubled their presence there. Forgive me for being cynical, but are we led to believe then that they will work out the will of the people in that region and they're just there because they're altruistic and peacekeepers? Well,
of course.
I don't know, but that mission there is called Operation Althea. It is the NATO and EU military force that is there to, according to their website, maintain the safe and secure environment in the country. But they're also there to count weapons, to count resources. They say they're there to recycle weapons too. It's a major presence in this region. And of course, Russia has spoken out against it as military creep. And especially since over the summer, Germany is adding 50 troops at a time. They are the most recent country to participate in Operation Althea. So now there are over 20 countries participating. This is why the stakes are really high for this recount. And it absolutely is one to watch because NATO has made themselves comfortable. They've taken off their shoes and they are there to stay, they say.
All right, so someone in the chat said that the EU just also took away $7 billion in aid as well to this area. So that's not surprising as well.
And they're playing a very similar game as they're playing with Serbia of, oh, you don't really want to join the EU membership, then we're going to, play with this kind of, are you really serious about being a part of EU? That kind of rhetoric.
And also when you think about here's your test, here's your petri dish of an idea. Look at what the UK has done in support of Russian sanctions and what it's gotten its people. Here's what Germany has done. Germany's in trouble. We're going to speak in just a few minutes on Germany, and it's not good. It's getting bad there, really bad. And so that's your example. And Germans, by the way, as Colonel Douglas McGregor spoke about earlier, and I spoke to him, he said the Germans are not used to this. This is your example of what it's like to be a member of the EU and to call on, say no to Russian gas, no to imports from that region, not throwing your support behind that, and watch your people freeze.
Yeah,
that's what's happening.
Right. And so this quote from the president there, whose name I shall no longer try to pronounce because it's a distraction, has said, we're not going to talk to you anymore when you have dangling carrots, right? So no more demanding complete obedience or else. This is not how reciprocity works, and we're done with that. And so obviously the West is like, well, we can't deal with somebody like this. And so they would really like a new leader there. So we'll see if that is the will of the people or if this is just, another occurrence of the United States saying this is not democracy unless we get our way.
When we get our way. But if she loses by 30,000 votes, I think you bring up a great point, which is, okay, we have 30,000 votes that she says were irregularities, and that his thugs were out in force intimidating people. In what way? To vote for him over her, and we're going to force you. What I mean, is there any evidence at all of that? There's the thugs showing up at polling places with guns, forcing someone to vote a certain way. I haven't seen any of that.
Again, that wouldn't come out in a recount if you were just literally counting papers, because there's not a paper trail of intimidation.
Right.
Or maybe there's a code you could write, like,
or hanging
being
chads.
Forced to vote, that kind of thing. That's ridiculous. So we will see. And most of her speeches have said, look, we've given our evidence already, and you will see. So we will absolutely see. But I think that it is interesting for those of us who live in the West to watch this a bit more closely.
Yeah. And you have to see this delicate balance that these leaders in the Balkans have to deal with, right? Which is to both kind of curry favor with the EU in some ways, but then also want to protect its people and to make sure that you're not freezing this winter by getting affordable Russian gas.
Yes.
Yes.